Hey everyone, and welcome back to WDIM News, my weekly podcast where I talk about sci-fi stuff and some other stuff. My name is Eric. Thank you very much for joining me today. Another busy week in sci-fi entertainment now that the writer's strike is officially over. So first, I have some news about a brand new sci-fi series that is being created by the man that brought us Breaking Bad. And since I hold Breaking Bad in the highest regard, this is a story that I'm very interested in. I also want to discuss the end of the first season of the Star Wars series Ahsoka and my feelings as to why I think it didn't really work for me. Last week on my podcast, I talked about the next film in the J.J. Abrams Star Trek film series and how, according to someone who worked on the film, it is still in pre-production and waiting to announce a director. Well, I have an idea on who the best person is to take over the Star Trek film series, and I want to share with you my idea on who that is. Then I want to discuss an interview that the creator of Lower Decks did about the future of that series, and if you are a fan of the series, you are definitely going to want to hear what he had to say. Then finally, I will end how I do most weeks, which is with my review of the latest episode of Star Trek Lower Decks. But before I do, I want to thank you for clicking on this video, and ask that you please hit that like button to help support us. Also, don't forget to subscribe so you know when my future videos come out. So first, I want to talk about that news story that I mentioned, which is that Vince Gilligan, the creator of Breaking Bad, has announced that his next new series will be based in science fiction. Now, this comes from an interview that Vince Gilligan did with the magazine Variety to commemorate the 10-year anniversary of the release of Breaking Bad. I have said this before in my podcast, Breaking Bad is by far my favorite series ever. It definitely has the best finale of any series that has ever been produced. I go back and forth on what my favorite series is of all time. Sometimes I'll say Breaking Bad, sometimes I'll say something else. But I always say that the best finale ever was the series finale of Breaking Bad. That is just a perfect finale, and I can't imagine any finale being any better than that. And this really excites me that the creator of Breaking Bad is going into the world of science fiction, and we're going to see something from his mind that, is also has to do with sci-fi. So I think that's going to be great. But he revealed in that interview that his next series will be for Apple TV, and Apple TV recently has had some pretty good hits with sci-fi series, like The Foundation and some other stuff that they've had over at Apple TV. I actually don't have Apple TV, so I haven't watched any of those series, but now that this is coming out, I probably will get Apple TV. So his first quote about the new series is that there's no crime and there's no methamphetamine. So that's kind of interesting because that's basically what Breaking Bad was about. I mean, especially the crime part. So the fact that this series will not be about the criminal element is pretty interesting, I think, because Better Call Saul, which he also created with Peter Gould, was obviously also about the criminal element, albeit from the perspective more so of the law. And he also mentioned that the series will be taking place in Albuquerque, New Mexico, albeit a very different one. So maybe that's a hint that this will be like an alternate past, alternate present kind of series. Those have been pretty popular recently. I know The Creator was a movie that was just released that had like an alternate past and an alternate present. Fallout will be a series that's released soon. That's sort of the same way. Something changed in the past, so now our present is different. And there's a lot of other series that have done that too. Vince Gilligan also went on to say that in this series, the world changes very abruptly in the first episode, and then it is quite different. And the consequences that reaps, hopefully, provide drama for many, many episodes after that. So this makes me think maybe there's a nuclear explosion, because if it is taking place in Albuquerque, New Mexico, there is a lot of nuclear testing that goes on in that region of the United States. So maybe a nuclear test went off and it went wrong. Or maybe this is going to be something like The Mist, Stephen King's The Mist, where there was a government facility that actually opened a portal to another dimension. Then all these crazy creatures came out of that dimension into our dimension and wreaked havoc on this town. I could definitely see him doing something very cool with a Mist-like series. As far as the cast of this new series, Rhea Seehorn has already been cast as the lead, and most people know her from her role in Better Call Saul. So like I said, Better Call Saul was the spinoff to Breaking Bad that was created by Vince Gilligan as well as Peter Gould, and Vince Gilligan directed several episodes of the series. I think he may have even directed the finale, but he did say that her character will be very different from her character from Better Call Saul. I know that Rhea Seehorn does have a lot of range. I've seen her in a couple other things, and she's really like bubbly in interviews and stuff. This series, which received a 2-season order from Apple TV right off the bat, will resume its writer's room on Monday, so that was this Monday, and begin filming in New Mexico this upcoming winter. Vince Gilligan has done stuff in sci-fi before. I think he was first and foremost known for his work on The X-Files, before Breaking Bad got popular. And The X-Files is, of course, one of the most popular, most famous sci-fi series that have ever been on television. But you let me know, is this story interesting to you? Are you going to be looking out for this series in the future? I'll probably continue to cover it, so any updates that I see online, I will bring to the podcast. But I think it's going to be really good. I think that already there's a lot of good people attached to this. Apple TV has had some good success with some series lately, and I know they've got a couple in the pipeline too that are like sci-fi based. So I'm excited for this. I think it's going to be really good, and it might be the next big thing in sci-fi. But let me know what you think of the story in the comments below. So now I'm going to get to my final review of Star Wars Ahsoka. Now, I did a review of, I think, half the season or just a few of the episodes in. I talked about it, and at the time I said I didn't really like the series. I did not watch Rebels, the animated series that preceded this live-action series, so I did not have any connection to these characters, and I believe that that was going to be a problem for me going forward, as it was then. And having finished the series, I think that that still held true. I didn't really find any connection to these characters. I mean, I will say that I thought the second half was better than the first, and the one character I think that shows in is Ahsoka, the main character. I think she is a more likable character in the second half, but I still don't get everything that's going on in the series because I didn't watch Rebels. I mean, I even tried to watch New Rockstars. They did like a summary of the first 4 seasons of Rebels, or the only 4 seasons, I should say. And I don't think I even made it through those. At least I wasn't, paying attention, because I don't find these characters that likable. I don't have any connection to them. And I think one of the most interesting things is that the characters that seem to be the most popular ones that came out of this series are Ray Stevenson as Balin and his apprentice. And those are new characters. So the fact that 2 new characters are the ones that everybody's talking about kind of shows you what the general public thinks of this series, especially the ones that didn't watch Rebels, because, it's the characters that are brand new that are the ones that are connecting, not the ones that you brought in from this other animated series. And this really mattered at the ending, because when the ending came for this series, it really fell flat for me. Again, I didn't watch Rebels, so a lot of the reveals at the end didn't resonate with me. Like, I'm not going to spoil it in case you haven't seen it and you plan to see it, but there is this ending scene with one of the characters, and he's standing on this like mountain with these 2 faces behind him. And people who watch Rebels apparently were like going crazy over that. Oh my God, he's doing the thing on the place. And I'm like, what's going on? I don't understand why we're ending here. So it was just stuff like that. There's a ton of other examples I can bring up of things that happened in this series that I didn't get. And, being someone that, has an Easter egg channel, like usually I am in the know. Usually I know what's going on. And it was really frustrating for me to be like not in on whatever the thing was going on. But the more I thought about it, I kind of think that it's possible that the creators of Ahsoka thought that because the movie A New Hope is basically the 4th film in the Skywalker series, and that's where this whole franchise started. So basically, the whole Star Wars thing started in Chapter 4. I think that because of that, they thought that the fans of Star Wars would be okay watching Ahsoka if they didn't watch Rebels too, because in the past, like with A New Hope, people have liked the movie and liked the story, even though they didn't know everything that was going on. They didn't know what was going on with Darth Vader. They didn't know what was going on with Obi-Wan, But the thing that A New Hope had that Rebels does not have was Luke, Leia, and Han. Those 3 characters who were brand new for that story. I mean, I know everyone is brand new because A New Hope was the first movie, but if you look at all the movies chronologically, Luke, Leia, and Han are the 3 new main characters for that movie. And those characters were so good that everybody was okay with loving them, and that's why they loved the movie. This series, Ahsoka, did not have that. They didn't have characters that you could really root for and that you really were interested in. And the only ones that were like that were Ray Stevenson and his apprentice. I can't remember her name. I think maybe it was Shanti or something. I don't know. But I thought that that was very telling, that everybody thought that, those 2 characters, the new characters for Ahsoka, were the best ones. That is a problem. Like, that shows you right there that there's a problem with your characters that you thought were going to carry the story, and they really didn't. And I've also seen, I saw some other reviews where people said they should have just done this animated. They should have just done this story as the 5th season of Rebels. And I think that there's a good point to be made for that. I think that it would have been a little more successful. Now, would have as many people watched it? No. But I think the people that would have watched it would have enjoyed it a lot more than people who watched this show, because I think that if this live action series was just done to set up a movie, I don't know that this series was as well received as they were expecting to kind of propel this series into a movie. You know, The Mandalorian started out on fire, and then by its last season, it was not as popular anymore. The Book of Boba Fett was kind of up and down with people. And those 2 series, as well as Ahsoka, it's the cast of those 3 series that's supposed to make up the next Star Wars movie. I don't know that these series have been successful enough to propel this storyline into a feature film. At least for me, it wasn't enough. You know, even the scenes between Ahsoka and her master, I didn't feel like I thought I would. Like seeing Anakin come back, and that's not a spoiler. He's been in the trailers, and everybody knew that Hayden Christensen had been filming scenes for this series when he was filming his scenes for Obi-Wan. So there are scenes with Hayden Christensen reprising his role as Anakin, and he, I thought, did a good job, but I just didn't feel the relationship between him and Ahsoka like I think I was supposed to. And, you know, those scenes between them, you're really supposed to feel for these characters. And I just didn't. I was just like, I don't really get what's going on here. And they go to some places that are new to this series that they haven't really touched on. And I think it gets confusing. Star Wars is already pretty busy. And in this series, especially towards the last episodes, everything is happening all the time. Like every character has got like a special thing. And, you know, you're supposed to know like the stormtroopers have stuff going on with them. And you're supposed to know like why their uniforms are different. And it's a lot of stuff. It's a very busy series, especially if you don't know like half of the source material. Something should have been done towards the beginning of the series that made the audience really understand these characters more than was done. Because when Ahsoka arrived on The Mandalorian, we just saw her as this new cool character, and we knew she was a Jedi, but we didn't really spend any time with her. We didn't get to know who she really was like we did in the series. Something like they actually did with what they ended up doing with her. I think if they would have taken 2 episodes to kind of make the change they did with her, instead of making it like 6 out of 8 episodes in, maybe her character would have been a little bit more likable earlier on, and it would have made the series a little more palatable. But still, I think that assuming that either everybody that hadn't watched Rebels would now go watch Rebels and would like these characters just because it's Star Wars, or that because, you know, in the past they've had success in Star Wars with not having to start at point A, not starting at the beginning of the story and kind of starting in the middle, and then fans kind of catching up. I don't know. For me personally, I didn't like it. I've kind of seen some reviews out there that sound a lot like mine too. Hopefully I'm not saying the same thing as other reviewers. I always worry about that. That's why I don't watch any reviews or listen to any reviews within like 2 or 3 days of when I record a podcast. So the reviews that I looked at were the first reaction reviews when the episode came out. So maybe actually maybe more people like it now, but I don't know. My first reaction is still the same reaction, and that's that it's just like meh for me. And a reviewer that I like a lot said meh for Star Wars is like a little bit worse than meh for something else or anything else. And I would agree, because you're just a little bit disappointed. You know, you're disappointed that this thing you love didn't really, you know, say anything new. Like Thrawn was supposed to be this huge new villain, and it just didn't resonate with me. Like all the scenes with him, he's very reserved and stuff. And I get that. Like he's a different kind of villain, but it's hard to watch if you don't get a payoff. And I don't really think we got a payoff with him. The whole time, he's just behind his people. And, you know, I get that that's kind of his character, but maybe on live action, it doesn't resonate as much. I don't know. With Darth Vader and with the Emperor, they still got their hands dirty, you know, like even though they had this huge presence, and that's what Thrawn is supposed to have, this huge presence, they still got their hands dirty. And maybe because Thrawn doesn't do that, maybe that's why I don't like him as much. But I don't know. That's, I guess, all I have to say about Ahsoka. But let me know, have you watched the series? What did you think about it? let's try and keep the comments spoiler-free in case some people are still on the fence about watching it. If you're asking me, should you watch the 8 episodes? I would say it's up to you, honestly. I don't know that if you're a Star Wars fan, you have to watch this. I think that there are things that are cool. One character that I really liked is this character named Morgan, who's an evil character. And she started out as just a stunt woman, and she's an actress now, or whatever. She's an actress in this series. And she's really cool. I liked her arc. I kind of liked what they did with her. And her fight scenes are some of the best. I would say that not since Ray Park did Darth Maul. Those fight scenes with Obi-Wan and Liam Neeson's character, Qui-Gon Jinn. Since those fight scenes, I have not seen as good lightsaber fight scenes than with her. So she was another kind of high point for me. Another, again, kind of a new character. She was on The Mandalorian. Her fight scenes are awesome. I thought Ray Stevenson did a really good job. R.I.P. It sounds silly to say that it's too bad that we're not going to get to see him for another series, because obviously people that care about him think about him a lot higher than that, than some stupid Star Wars series. So, at least he has this as one of his final pieces of work. And I think people really appreciate his work on this series, even people like me that didn't really like Ahsoka. And I'm glad that his final performance is being reviewed so well. So just let me know in the comments, did you like Ahsoka, and are you excited for the future of Star Wars? Okay, now I'm going to try a seamless transition from the world of Star Wars to the world of Star Trek with one man, and that is Gareth Edwards. So last week I talked about an article I found that was an interview with one of the writers on Star Trek 4. Now, if you're thinking, wait a minute, Star Trek 4 came out a long time ago. No, this is the J.J. Abrams cast, mainly the sequel to Star Trek Beyond. And she seemed to think that Star Trek 4 was still in pre-production and that they were either looking for a director or ready to announce a director soon once the writer's strike is over. My feelings on the next Star Trek movie have always kind of been lukewarm. I don't really think that Star Trek needs a feature film to be successful. But I think there is a way to do it if they need to do it. Like if they are just hell-bent on making another movie, this is what I would do. I would not continue with the J.J. Abrams cast. I would start new, and I would get Gareth Edwards. Now, Gareth Edwards, if you're not familiar, is the director of The Creator, the movie that just came out about robots. And he also directed movies like Rogue One for Star Wars and Godzilla 2014. See, there's my Star Wars, Star Trek transition. And, even though The Creator was not a box office hit, I think it's a great film. If you've seen it, maybe you agree with me, maybe you don't. But you probably can agree that it looked phenomenal. And in case you don't listen to my podcast, you wouldn't know that the film was made for only $80 million, which probably sounds like a lot of money to you and me. But for a movie, especially a sci-fi movie, especially a movie like this, that is peanuts. Usually movies like this cost 2 to 3 times as much to make. And the fact that Gareth Edwards was able to make The Creator for this amount of money means that even if The Creator isn't a big success, it's still not a big flop either, because it doesn't have that much money to make back. I think they say that in Hollywood, you need to make back at least 2 times the budget of the film for it to be considered a success. I am not sure that The Creator will make $160 million, but it will be close. And you can say a lot of things about why this movie wasn't a success. I mean, the writer's strike was going on and the actor's strike was going on. So there was very little promotion done by the people who worked on the movie for this film. The director was like the only one who could promote it, which is pretty bad. I mean, we haven't had a lot of hits lately because of this. And unfortunately, The Creator is one of those movies that is a casualty of the writers and the actors' strike. But the ultimate barometer for what is a great movie is not box office success. So I still have the opinion that The Creator is a good film, and it makes me want to watch this director more. If there is going to be another Star Trek film, I think that it needs to be broken down to the franchise's core elements and does not need to be a big budget blockbuster. And Rogue One would be a good example of what I'm talking about. It was a film that paid homage to the characters and events in the Star Wars universe while showing the audience a simpler kind of adventure. It was basically just a heist film. It was, I think, the first film that was kind of a splinter off into that same universe. And that's exactly what Star Trek needs. It doesn't necessarily need, a crew on the Enterprise or even a crew in Starfleet. there's a lot of little corners in the Star Trek universe or events that have happened that we didn't really get to see everything that happened, like the Cardassian occupation of Bajor. That plotline is pretty relevant right now with current events going on in the Middle East. There are things that have happened in the universe of Star Trek that we haven't seen on film before. So these are things that a movie could be made off, and you could have a totally new cast, much like Rogue One was. And like I said, Gareth Edwards worked on Rogue One, and that really reinvigorated a lot of people's interest in Star Wars, and that's kind of what Star Trek needs too. And another thing, and I kind of mentioned this, is I think that Star Trek just needs to start over with a new cast and film series. The J.J. Abrams cast would just be too expensive to get back. The main cast has really blown up kind of, so to get all those people back, there's a big chunk of your budget right there. And I just said that Star Trek needs to have a slimmed down budget kind of movie. So I think it's impossible to do that with that cast unless you just bring back like Chris Pine or something like that. And then why do that? If you're only going to bring one to like have some kind of continuity. I mean, I think it was 4 years ago that Star Trek Beyond came out. So you're already losing that continuity already because people are going to forget about that cast. You need to start over because you're not going to be able to bring those actors back to play these roles. Also, the adventures of the USS Enterprise are now currently being shown on Star Trek Strange New Worlds, and that is Paramount Plus's flagship series for Star Trek. So if you're going to have a movie about a different crew in a different universe on the same ship with some of the characters being played on both, projects by different actors, I think it's just too busy. I think that you're going to confuse fans. And I also think you're going to dilute both products. I think you're going to make Star Trek Strange New Worlds a little worse. And I think that the fact that Strange New Worlds is a series that's still creating new content, I think it's going to make the next movie a little worse if it does come out with the crew of the USS Enterprise. So like I said, I think the smart thing would be, instead of following the crew of a ship like we've done for every Star Trek movie, let's follow a moment. Make the movie based in the Star Trek universe, but from a different perspective than maybe we have seen before. Like maybe people that aren't Starfleet. Like I said, Rogue One showed us a crew that was made up of people from corners of the Star Wars universe that we didn't even know existed. I think you can do that with Star Trek too. There's so many races of aliens that can be brought back, and you can have interesting characters and learn more about that, race of alien and make it about a moment, kind of like how the voyage home was kind of like that. I mean, yes, we were following the crew of the USS Enterprise, but they weren't on the Enterprise anymore, right? They were on a Klingon ship, and they went back in time, and it was, again, like a heist. They had to get the thing, get the whales, and do the thing, and that's, I think, what Star Trek needs in a new movie. They just need a crew, but not a crew from Starfleet, just a group, a motley crew of people that live within this universe that the audience will recognize without being, this is the sixth actor playing Spock or something like that. Like, we don't need another Spock story. We need to see other parts of the Star Trek universe. And I think that a writer/director like Gareth Edwards would be great for that, because he not only made the Star Wars universe more interesting, but I think he did the same thing when he directed Godzilla in 2014. I really like that movie. And one of the things I always say about that Godzilla film in particular is that there are some standout performances by the human beings in it, which is pretty rare in a Godzilla film. Usually in these like monster movies, you don't even care about the humans, and they're usually killed or something happens or whatever. You just want to see the monsters fighting the monsters, or the monsters fighting the robots. Speaking of Breaking Bad, Gareth Edwards got Bryan Cranston to be in Godzilla 2014. So that's another thing. The fact that Gareth Edwards has worked with so many great actors on these films in his career, that means that he may be able to get some of them onto a Star Trek project where they haven't thought about that before. I'm thinking of you, Bryan Cranston. I mean, how great would that be to add Bryan Cranston to the Star Trek universe? So I think that there's a lot of positives to getting Gareth Edwards into the Star Trek universe and getting him to do the next movie. Because look, the creator, I think a lot of people like, but like I said, it's a bomb. So he also needs something to kind of get his name back out there. And since he is so like seeped in sci-fi right now, it would make a lot of sense for him to take over Star Trek. So think about it, of all the people that people have brought up, that, this person can take over Star Trek, or this person can take over Star Trek. If tomorrow you saw like online that the director of the creator was directing the next Star Trek film, that would make sense to you, wouldn't it? So hopefully that is what happens. Hey, if anybody at Paramount Plus is listening to this podcast, you don't have to pay me anything. Just get Gareth Edwards, and hey, get Jeffrey Combs on Strange New Worlds too while you're at it. But those are just my 2 cents. Let me know what you think. Do you think Gareth Edwards is the right person to take over the next Star Trek movie? Or do you have another idea of someone who would be a good person to take over the next movie? Or do you think we don't need a Star Trek movie and we can just have the series on streaming? Let me know in the comments below. So before I get to my review of Lower Decks, I want to talk about this interview with Mike McMahan, the creator of the series. And man, did I have a hard time reading this because this is not what I want to hear. So Mike McMahan did an interview with the website Cinema Blend, and he made it seem like there's a chance that the 5th season of Lower Decks will be its last. Now, right now, we are in the 4th season of Lower Decks, and the 5th season has already been greenlit. Now, I know what you're saying. Well, the 2nd season of Prodigy was greenlit, and they were making it, and they took it down. Could that happen again? I can't say that it can't happen again, because it happened to Prodigy. So, yeah, maybe we won't see this 5th season either. I don't know. But let's just talk about the interview, and then I'll kind of talk about my feelings. So this is what Mike McMahan, the creator of Lower Decks, had to say about the future of the series in an interview with Cinema Blend. Yeah, I mean, listen, we're in weird times. Everything is changing. I think everything's going to continue to change. I would say nothing is safe. I don't have any bad news for anybody, but also, I think you shouldn't assume that this stuff is going to stick around unless you vocally and watch it early on. I do not know if we're going to have another season after the season we're working on right now, season 5. Lower Decks could very well be a 5-season show. If you have listened to my podcast, you know that I love Lower Decks, so this is really bad news for me. But there's a couple of things that I want to fill in here as to why Mike McMahan could be saying this and why this really could be a 5-season show. So in the past, when Lower Decks was first announced, it was announced with a 2-season order. And then in season 2, when it was renewed for a 2-season order. And then during season 3, it was renewed for a 5th season, but that's it. So that's not a good sign right there. I mean, if in the past you're getting 2-season orders and now you're getting a 1-season order, that is a sign right there that maybe everything isn't going your way. Also, cast member Tawny Newsome is going to be a writer on the live-action Starfleet Academy series. I know that she is a comedian, an actress, and a writer, so she has other stuff going on too. But the fact that she has already lined up another job within the Star Trek universe, that could also not be a great sign. Because it could be a sign that she knows that the writing's on the wall at Lower Decks and that she needs to find another job for herself. Or it could just be another opportunity that she's taking while she's doing Lower Decks and Starfleet Academy. I mean, Seth MacFarlane has like 16 jobs, so Tawny Newsome can probably do 2 things at the same time. But could also be a sign that, like I said, the writing's on the wall. Other cast member Jack Quaid is like 100 times more in demand than he was when he signed on to voice Boimler. So that could affect his availability as well as his rate of pay. He is definitely the most famous person on this show right now, and probably one of the most famous people working on any Star Trek series. So the fact that he is on Lower Decks is great, but every season they may have to re-sign him. They may have to work around, his availability with his other stuff. He's got the boys. That could affect his character being on the show. And I brought this up before, that the fact that this new character, T'Lyn, has been so much in the forefront this season, and she's a new character, maybe they brought her in to replace Boimler. Because I could really see Jack Quaid leaving Lower Decks because he's just moving on to bigger things. But still, the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th seasons of Lower Decks are all certified fresh on Rotten Tomatoes, and that is a big deal. For comparison, they have a higher rating than Ahsoka does, even though more people haven't watched Ahsoka, of course. But they are rated higher than that series. So maybe that could bring them back. But again, there are a lot of things working against Lower Decks right now that weren't working against them, 2 years ago. And that may be the frustration and the trepidation that Mike McMahan is feeling, because not just what's going on in his show, obviously everything is going to be different now because of the writer strike and the actor strike. Things are going to be changing. And Paramount has been canceling things left and right. So I can understand that, you would be scared in this kind of environment. But it makes me wonder if any of these characters could continue on another project. Maybe if you get Jack Quaid in live action form, maybe you can keep him in Star Trek. I don't know what they would put him on. Maybe transport Boimler to the future and put him on Starfleet Academy. And then you have Tawny Newsome writing for Boimler. That would make a lot of sense. But besides that, I don't know that they're going to be able to keep Jack Quaid. But Boimler and Mariner did look and act really good in live action in the crossover episode of Strange New Worlds. So maybe there's a future there for those characters or some other characters from Lower Decks to continue on in other series. I, for one, hope this series keeps going. I hope they get at least 7 seasons. I mean, they only get 10 episodes a season, so even if they get 7 seasons, it's not going to be like there's as many episodes of Lower Decks as there are of a usual Star Trek show. That would also be as many seasons as Discovery is getting, and it's one more season than Enterprise got. So this is what Mike McMahon had to say about the future of the show and how you could help Lower Decks get more seasons. So if you love Lower Decks as much as I do, I would say make sure to watch it and get people to watch it now. A letter writing campaign after a show gets canceled, it's helpful, but what's more helpful is campaigning to get more eyes on the show when it's airing, because it gives me the ability to push more seasons. I would love to finish Lower Decks with a plan that I have for it. I would say take Prodigy looking for a new network, and take a look at Picard being wrapped at Season 3, and at Discovery wrapping as well. I would say read those as signs that if you want more Lower Decks, you should be vocal about it now and not wait. This is a little interesting to me because I thought Picard was always supposed to be 3 seasons, but Mike McMahon seems to insinuate that it was actually canceled at Season 3 and that it wasn't the original plan to go 3 seasons. So I think that's kind of interesting. Again, this is not great news, but I can totally see where Mike McMahon's coming from. Lower Decks is probably not as popular as the network feels that it should be. So if you love Lower Decks like I do, let's just tell everybody about it, try and get more people to watch it. Of course, I do videos about Lower Decks twice a week, so I'm definitely playing my part. But if you want to help, like my videos, share my videos, that will get more people into Lower Decks. Let me know, what do you think about this news? Are you worried about Lower Decks like I am? And what will you be doing to help get the word out more that Lower Decks should continue on for many more seasons? So now that we've been talking about the future, let's talk about the present of Lower Decks, and that would be the 6th episode of the 4th season. I love this episode. It was a return to Ferengi. I'm a huge fan of the Ferengi. I've mentioned before that DS9 is my favorite Star Trek series. I love what Armin Shimmerman and Max Radenchik did with the Ferengi on DS9, so it was so cool to get to go back there again. This also continues with what I've mentioned before on this season of Lower Decks, that they're just going to a new planet every week, kind of like what Strange New Worlds has been doing. And I think that's great. I know that a lot of fans before the season have said that they love Star Trek when it just went to a new place every week, and that's really what Star Trek was before we got into like the newer iterations of Star Trek. And it looks like the writers on Lower Decks took the hint, and it was another nice catch-up with some characters from DS9 after last season. Of course, last season, Lower Decks went to DS9, and we got to catch up with Quark, and we got to catch up with Kira. So it was really nice to catch up with even more DS9 characters this season and not have to go back to DS9 to do it. We got to see Ferengi. I also like that they seem to hint at a relationship between Rutherford and Tendi. A lot of shows have that will they, won't they kind of dynamic in them. It makes them more popular. Definitely that kind of storyline has its own demographic and can bring in a lot of viewers. But I like how in this relationship, it seems that like the twist is that the won't they part of the will they, won't they, it makes more sense for them not to be in a romantic relationship and instead just be these platonic friends that are just really, really close. And everybody thinks that like, wow, like get a room, you two. And they have hinted at it several times before in this series that these two may end up together. But I think that the dynamic of this relationship is such that it makes more sense that they won't be together and they'll just stay like this, because we see in this episode, as soon as they go into that new kind of icky area of their relationship, they can't handle it and they both get embarrassed and they just kind of freak out. So I kind of like that. It doesn't mean that they won't end up together in the future. They could mature, and usually if one of them gets hurt or one of them almost dies or one of them almost leaves the dynamic of that relationship, they start to reevaluate how they feel about the other character. And then we'll see some kind of jump, like either they'll not see each other anymore or they will become romantic. So I'm expecting something like that in the near future. But for now, I kind of like how the will they, won't they relationship is working out with Rutherford and Tendi. And I think it's pretty cool. Like I said, it's a nice twist and I'm enjoying it. In this episode, I also like the return of Crazy Mariner. I think Mariner has like at least one episode every season where she just gets drunk and starts doing crazy stuff. I love how she had the hat on her head with the Ferengi ears that were, also beers or drinks or whatever they were. I thought that was really funny. It would kind of reminded me of a young Picard, like in the episode Tapestry. And I think there was even a Domjot table in the bar they were at, and that may be where I got that idea from. But she kind of reminds me of like a young Picard, brash and can do whatever they want and stuff like that. The only thing that didn't really sit with me well was when she started getting like all weird about not wanting to be promoted. I thought that we had closure on that storyline already, so the fact that she brought it up again was kind of weird. I didn't like that. I just like her being crazy. I don't think that she needs a reason to get drunk. I kind of like that better about her character. The fact that, she went into all these problems she was having, and even the Ferengi she was talking to was like, you're crazy. Like, everything you're mentioning doesn't make any sense. I think that it came that way to the audience too. Like, why is Mariner still going through this? We thought she was done with it, and she still has a chip on her shoulder. She should probably get over it now. I think they've dealt with this a few times, and she should be able to move past it. So hopefully this is the last time we hear of Mariner not wanting to be promoted. I really love the addition of another member of the Kids in the Hall to the Star Trek universe. Dave Foley was the voice of the concierge in the hotel. He is one of the members of the Kids in the Hall. And he probably is the one that likes Star Trek the most. I've seen more than one interview with him where he talked about his love of Star Trek. But he is not the first member of the Kids in the Hall to appear in Star Trek. That would be Scott Thompson, who appeared on an episode of Voyager. I mentioned this in my breakdown of the episode, my video that came out on Thursday, which you should definitely check out after you listen to this podcast. I will link it in the description and in the comments below. And this brings up something that I have been thinking for a while, that the voice actors this season of Lower Decks seem to have really improved. And we really got some titans of television. We even got SpongeBob SquarePants in this latest episode. Star Trek Lower Decks is really moving up there in regards to who they can get for their voice actors. So I thought that was really funny, and I'm a huge fan of Kids in the Hall. So I love that there are now 2 members of the 5-man group in this universe. I can't wait till the other 3 join Star Trek. And then, of course, we got another appearance by the mysterious villain, that single life form ship. I did think it was interesting that just like when the Orion ship was attacked, I think 2 episodes ago, the Ferengi were also going through weapons. If you remember in the Orion episode, when that ship was attacked, the members of that crew were going over all these Federation weapons they had stolen or pirated or something like that. And then in this episode, members of the Ferengi crew are also doing the same thing. So maybe that has some connection as to which ships are getting attacked. Maybe somebody is also not just getting ships, but they're getting weaponry and stuff like that. Maybe they're just building up an arsenal. I also thought it seemed like one of the members of the Ferengi crew was expecting the ship to show up. I think they said just in time or right on time. Or that might have been a joke that went over my head. I'm not sure. I still think that this ship is an amalgamation of a lot of characters that have shown up on Lower Decks so far, like Badgie and Peanut Hamper and Agamus. I know that we're going to see Badgie next week in the next episode of Lower Decks, so maybe we'll get a big jump forward with this storyline. But I don't know. All in all, again, another good episode of Lower Decks. It's hard for me to get too hyped on this episode because we were just talking about Lower Decks maybe getting canceled after 5 seasons, so I'm still kind of bummed about that. But that withstanding, I thought that this was a really good episode of Lower Decks. I love when they're able to bring back voice actors to play characters that they did before. But let me know, what did you think of this episode of Lower Decks, and are you liking the season so far? Well, that is all I have this time, but let me know in the comments if I missed anything. Thank you very much for listening. Please remember to give this podcast a like before you go, and I'll see you next time on What Did I Miss?